I'm going to talk now about the anatomy of the skeleton. Now, you've learned some of the basic bones of the body while you're at school, but when you arrive at medical school you have to learn things in much greater detail, and I hope to illustrate now a bit of that extra detail that you'll have to learn when you arrive. So we're going to start with the bones of the skull. Now, this whole dome bit on top of the skull is called the cranium, but in fact it consists of 4 different bones. Now, these are separate bones when you're a baby, and that's why babies have that soft spot at the middle of the head. It's where the bones don't quite join up. Now, the different bones are named after the brain lobes that lie underneath them. So here at the front we have the frontal bone, which overlies the frontal lobe. On the side we have a left parietal bone and a right parietal bone overlying the parietal lobe. Underneath, just under your ear, there's the temporal bone, and right at the back is the occipital bone that overlies right at the back of your brain. Now, if we move down to the neck, you might have heard on the television, say for example in Casualty or ER, people talking about C-spine injuries. Now, the C-spine, which stands for cervical spine, refers to your neck, so they're really worried about a neck injury. Now, the neck bones are all types of vertebrae, and they're specialised, and they stop where your ribs appear. So these are the cervical vertebrae moving down to the rib cage where they become thoracic vertebrae, which is a different type of spine. Now, you can see the different spinal bones in here, and you should also be able to see these grey bits that lie in between the bones, and they're called the intervertebral discs. When you get down into the chest, into the thoracic vertebrae, there are 12 of those, and they all have ribs coming from the sides of them. So these are all the ribs. Now, there's a bit of an urban myth that boys and girls have different numbers of ribs, but because there are 12 thoracic vertebrae, you have 12 ribs on each side, no matter what sex you are. Another strange bit are these differently coloured bits at the front here. So they're a bit similar to the intervertebral discs in that they're part of the skeletal system, but in fact these are called costal, which means ribs, cartilages. So these are costal cartilages which connect the bones to the sternum, which is this sternal bone right in the middle of your body. It's quite hard if you press on it. Another bit of detail, you might be used to thinking of the shoulder as a single joint, the shoulder joint. But when you get to medical school, you in fact learn that there are 3 parts to the shoulder joint. There's a part where your collarbone, or your clavicle, joins your scapula, or your wing bone, and that's called the acromio, which is the part of the scapula, clavicular joint, acromioclavicular joint, which is one part of the shoulder. The second bit is where your humerus, which is the bone in your upper arm, joins the scapula, and that's called the glenohumeral joint, again after this socket shape in here. And finally, the scapula interacts with the rib cage, and that's called the scapulothoracic, which means chest joint. So the shoulder joint is a combination of the acromioclavicular joint, the glenohumeral joint, and the thoracoscapular joint. So you can see how it's a bit more complicated when you need to know it in a lot more detail.